Hi there. Today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album from Igloo Ghost, Kai Whiston, and Babby titled XYZ. I hope you enjoy. XYZ is the intro to the album. Now, it's only like a 15-second intro, like a small interlude, but the amount of sound play here gives you a small taste of what's to come on the album, especially how crazy it's going to get. It sounds like I'm in an interdimensional washing machine, and it leads right into the next track. Lux 2 is seemingly a continuation of the song Lux off Kai Whiston's last album, and it starts off with some pretty sample-laced drum machines. It's very boomy, it catches your attention immediately. And it also has a sample that I recognize from Tonight's EP that came out like, seems like forever ago. And with that being said, the track reaches a very dense melodic high point in the middle of the track where everything is just kind of converging on each other. The bass towards the back end of the track gets insanely heavy, and it's complemented by some really creative synthesizer play as well. Drown You is an absolute banger. It starts off with some bounce to it, and it's also given a very elusive performance by Babby. The vocals are infectiously catchy, and they fit very well, actually contrast very well, with how frenetic the progression of the track becomes. Like the core of the track that you hear at the beginning is still there by the end, but by the time you're done with the song, it feels like so much around it has changed, and that is just great in my opinion. Locky starts off with some heavily warped sounds and quickly morphs into like this interdimensional journey with some soft keys in the background to give the track a bit more atmosphere. The middle of the track gets these really stuttering melodies that are surrounded by this like kind of this weird darkness to it. And the vocals, while they're not a big part of the mix, they do highlight how rampant the track is. It's like these sounds are refracting off each other, like it's in a prism or something. And I feel like the outro does a very nice job of showing you this dichotomy between the somber yet the boomy parts of the song. Mao Shit is immediately met with some pretty thick and boomy drums, which complemented with what sounds like cymbals or like a xylophone or like bells of some kind. Like that rhythm is very, very noticeable, yet it's not the mainstay of the track. And during the instrumental passage, it kind of hits this nice breakbeat section before halfway of the track. And it kind of progresses to where the last track goes all in on this bass distortion. Like the bass gets absolutely abused before ending with a calm, cymbalish melody that's kind of scattered with bass distortion. So you kind of get that unique identity to the track that doesn't let go, no matter what direction it goes into. I think it's pretty great. See Through starts off with vocals, and it actually made me laugh because in the middle of like the intro vocals, it sounded like Babby is getting shot to death, and then she's immediately brung back. Um, I think it's a nice change of pace for the album because she's actually very heavily focused on track. Her vocals no longer kind of meld in the background as much. They actually focus around her. It gives it like the track this halogenic, futuristic sound with all these pulsating drums, a lot of the wonky samples that sound like they're bouncing off each other in a chamber of some kind. Then the track kind of ascends with some passages to lead to this really, really uniquely beautiful outro. Like all, it still has the boominess to it of all the insane drum machine play and stuff, but it's also laced with some strings and bells that completely wash over the track and give it a completely refreshing feeling. Teeth Chisel sounds like the main theme song for an underground cyberpunk fight club. The aesthetic here is extremely gritty, yet very bright. I feel like the synthesizers, how glossy and glistening they are, contrast very well with how muddy yet hard hitting the drums are. And I think the pacing of the track is pretty good. So a lot of the more louder, up in your face parts are kind of met with these shorter, bell like passages right before it just dunks your head back into the craziness of it. And the outro of this thing also seemingly blends into the next track. So it kind of feels like an interlude or a setup to the next track, but it also works so well on its own. Barely Twins starts off with these nice echoey vocals, and immediately the track begins to ramp up its sound like it's going to be a goddamn doom metal track. And soon thereafter, all hell breaks loose on the track as the bass goes up to like freaking 20, with all these heavy wailing electronic sounds in the background. It gives the track a pretty nice electro industrial edge to it that I very much enjoy. There's also a glitchy portion in the middle of the track where a lot of the vocals feel like they're short circuiting right before it leads into like this weird tribal initiation ceremony. And then it immediately goes into the staticky portion where it just floods the speakers with just weird vocals and aggressive noise. And I really like the outro as well because it feels like the samples they're using, they're just drowning them. And it makes for such a satisfying conclusion for the closer on the album. Lamb is the closer on the album, and it starts off with a pretty nice vocal melody. It's pretty bouncy, and at first it sounds like it's going to be like this bubblegum based pop song. The vocals then transition to this very low key passage with some liquidy sounds, complemented with some bells and some keyboards, right before it transitions into an absolute drum fest. But even with all this craziness going on, it still retains its sense of melody, even with all the freneticism that's happening throughout the track. The main vocal refrain right before the outro is repeated again in a normal fashion before it is glitched and warped into oblivion, and that leads into this really grand and explosive finish for the entire record. I was already pretty familiar with these artists. I love everything Igloo Ghost puts out. I thought Kai Whiston's album last year was pretty good. And I thought Babby had a pretty solid debut this year. So when they said they were going to have a collaborative effort, I was pretty excited, mostly to see how their sounds would mesh together. And on this album, man, it works almost perfectly. Like every time I listened to the album, I grew more and more fascinated with the sound play and just how many ideas they're putting in together without having to compromise their own identities. It expresses their individuality very well while also showing you how much they're capable as a group. It's very it's otherworldly, it's insane, it's charming, but most importantly, it's just a super fun and creative album. And that being said, this is definitely one of my favorites of the year. I would give this one a 10 out of 10.